Hi everyone, I'm Mirta, a postdoctoral fellow at McGill University, and welcome back to Translating Cancer Research, a podcast series focused on discussing ways to more rapidly and effectively implement fundamental research findings into the clinic to improve the lives of patients with cancer. We host scientists, clinicians, industry professionals, and patient advocates to help us paint a picture of the translational research process and determine how we can optimize it. So before we get started, I would like to thank our two sponsors. Our first sponsor is the McGill Center for Translational Research in Cancer, under which we have founded a student committee that is conceptualizing, hosting, and editing all parts of this podcast. The goal of this center is to provide a solid foundation based on state-of-the-art platforms, multidisciplinary training, and academic industrial partnerships for the advancement of scientific knowledge, specifically at this interface between fundamental and clinical research. Secondly, I would like to thank the Tramplin Consortium. Selected from a competitive pool, our podcast was granted the Tramplin Ambassador Award, which helped us acquire all of our recording equipment and software that we need for this show. The consortium reunites trainees across all McGill-affiliated research institutes with the goal of empowering biomedical trainees, strengthening community ties, and promoting a strong professional development infrastructure in the life sciences sector. This includes various funding opportunities, workshops, training programs, and networking events. For both the MCTRC and the Tramplin Consortium, if you would like to learn more about them, you can check the description below where we have linked their websites and LinkedIn pages. And now for the episode. Welcome to our second episode of the MCTRC podcast. Today we have the honor of hosting André Diamant. André is also a McGill alumni, so we welcome you back home to this podcast. I do welcome you from home from McGill. But also André is the CEO of Gray Oncology Solutions, so we have the honor of looking into his translational research product that he launched in his startup company today. Welcome to the episode, André.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's fun to be here.
Of course. Yeah, I'm sure our listeners are really excited to hear from you today, and many students are excited to hear about the solutions you implemented in founding your startup and also changing your career. So I'm really looking forward to this. So let's start by just the idea of a startup itself. So we're back in 2019. 2020, you're graduating from your PhD in medical physics from McGill, and you have this great idea. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly I guess we have some time to talk it through, but to try and keep things relatively concise at least, a little bit of the motivation and how I ended up here. So I'm an academic by background, as you mentioned. I was doing my PhD at McGill in medical physics. And traditionally, folks who go through that PhD will go into either the clinic and become sort of a clinical medical physicist after a residency, very similar to med school, or they'll go on to be an academic and continue their research. The sort of third path, which is a bit more uncommon, is industry and going to work in a number of the existing companies in the space. And pretty early on, I had looked at that and decided, hey, this might be for me. You know, there's a number of reasons why that intrigued me. And then, of course, once you're thinking of industry, the startup world, especially over the past decade, also was something I kind of had in the back of my head. One thing led to another, and another fellow in the same PhD program, Mark, actually got a sort of a hybrid postdoc entrepreneurship scholarship. And he graduated a year ahead of me. So he kind of was entering this postdoc and also starting this company at the same time. And he didn't really have sort of a second head to that company because it was just him and a few professors. And we started talking, and at this point I was finishing up my PhD and I was still trying to figure out what direction I would go. And kind of one thing led to another, and all of these ideas sort of crystallized, and the timing was right for us to say, hey, let's kind of launch this company in earnest together, and let's see what we can do. And that's really how Gray was born back in sort of end of 2019, early 2020, just as COVID was hitting.
So you two teamed up, two McGill alumni. It's that took some courage. How about the team? How about some other influences at that time who were instrumental in that process?
Yeah, so sort of the founding body is myself and Mark as if you want to say the full-time employees and the people who are going to really kind of throw all of our heart and soul and time into it. And then also a trio of professors from the McGill area, sort of spread with affiliations across Polytechnique and McGill, and the clinical side of the McGill University Health Center. And really, I mean, translational research, of course, is very central to this story. Because a lot of the motivation behind Gray was there has been this research that those three had been doing for decades in a field called operations research of healthcare logistics and how can we sort of optimize schedules and coordinate care more effectively. But all of that research had kind of stayed in the academic space. Of course, it had been presented, it had been discussed, it had been cited. But Gray was really born of a desire to how can we take this and then kind of translate it into a real world application which can make a clinical impact. So in many ways, those three advisors and those three professors kind of make up a lot of the backbone of the science and the research that actually goes into the company today.
Would you say at the time you were the only one in your class considering doing something different other than the clinical job or maybe pursuing an academic career, or there were other people venturing into new things?
It's a good question. I think I was the only one. Mostly I'm just basing that off of now I have hindsight clearly. And looking back at my graduating class and the year below me and above me, I think everybody else went into either the clinic or academia. There may have been one or two who went into industry, but I don't believe any. Actually, that's not true. There was one other who went and worked at a startup. So I would say certainly uncommon. I wouldn't say it's the most common route.
Yes. So for our listeners, if you're thinking about taking that next step or a very unusual step, I think André is here to encourage you in that direction.
It's certainly an option. I'd keep your eyes open, and it doesn't necessarily need to be. I mean, evidently, I joined a startup at an extremely early age and effectively, founded a startup. But that you don't necessarily need to be the one founding it. There are a lot of startups out there, like us, as an example, who are hiring. So you can go look for those jobs as well. And it's not necessarily. I mean, sometimes you might find one that doesn't necessarily have too much funding, and that can be fun in itself. But it's not like startups can't offer you a job that will keep you financially stable or anything like that. They have paying jobs too. So I would again just encourage everybody to keep your eyes open, and there's lots of options out there.
Thank you for that. So we will transition in a slightly different direction. I would just quote a little bit of statistics, which might not be so popular, but according to some resources, 60% of all startups fail within the first 3 years. However, in this health sector, which is told to make up 10% of all startups in Canada, they're most likely to survive after 5 years. So looking back, if you could tell us a little bit of that story of maybe the first year of Gray OS and what did that look like for you, and how did your company make it after that 3-year mark and then 5-year mark?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly a long and winding road with lots of ups and downs. Certainly at the start, when we had this idea and kind of we were going out to do it and try to say like, hey, can we build something? At that point, evidently it was kind of us. We didn't have a team of developers, and we were doing some exploration and sort of figuring out, speaking to healthcare professionals and seeing, are we solving a real problem? Because that's always at the crux of, can you build a sustainable company, is, are you solving a real problem? And then subsequently, are you solving a real problem that there's some sort of way to pay for it? And it's the way I like to put it is people like to complain. There's a lot of problems out there that people complain about, but won't necessarily pay for. And we experience that in our own personal life as well. Lots of things that we might complain about every other day, but at the end, we're not going to go spend $100 trying to solve it. So figuring out, okay, this is something that there's a real market need there. There's a problem. And we were having those conversations, and we actually pivoted early on where, we found something and it was one of those things that people complain about, but might not really buy. So we had to pivot a little bit. And then COVID hit. And initially, I'll be honest, we thought we were like, okay, let's go get jobs because, we haven't really built much yet. We certainly have no money. We hadn't sold anything. So hospitals aren't going to have the time to talk to two people fresh out of a degree trying to solve scheduling and resource allocation in cancer care. But what we found, and this is credit to the CHUM in Montreal, was that they actually pulled us closer because in a time of crisis like COVID, they were more interested in what we were providing. Basically, the problem was exacerbated. And because of that, they had the time and space and energy, I suppose, to bring us closer and actually expedite the process at which we could work with them and have this clinical environment to build something. Hand in hand with that, the money is a critical piece, of course, because it's not like I was sitting on a pile of gold or anything. So I had some bills to pay myself, and then for us to hire a team of a few developers to actually build the product, we would need some money. And we were, again, fortunate. The granting space in Canada is very good, as you have probably also experienced in academia. And again, at COVID time, there was a lot of money the government, both federal and provincial, was just injecting into, frankly, anything they could. Like they were just saying, let's spend money to try and innovate and solve this crisis. And we were able to kind of capitalize on that. And with the CHUM, we partnered with them and applied for a pretty large grant that we were fortunate to get. That then led us, so this was, let's say, 6 to 12 months into the lifespan of the company. We were then able to use that to hire a few people, build this early product, and then we went to investors. And we raised some external funding from investors, which kept us going for a bit more, continued getting grants. And then we started to get to a point where, okay, now I was able to actually sell this product to a health system and generate revenue. And that's kind of where we are now. So again, there's certainly been ups and downs. That time when I said about the grant, us getting that first grant, there was a few days in there where we were starting to look at job boards. Like we were like, look, if we don't get this grant, the company is probably just dead because
so
it was so.
You had a plan B in place.
We absolutely did. Now I don't have a plan B.
Okay.
Now, it's not that I don't feel like I could do anything. Of course I could. I would find a way, right? But right now, this is my life, and we're confident in the direction we're going. And now we're what you would call cash flow positive, meaning it's not like we're at risk month over month of suddenly falling over, which is a very privileged position to be in, especially in today's market. But yeah, it wasn't always like that. there were many years where it wasn't like that. So.
Yes, that sounds both challenging and exciting at the same time. So I will now hit you with another statistics from an article called 21 Groundbreaking Canadian Entrepreneur Statistics. We found that entrepreneurs have to work on average 70 hours per week to become successful. Can you comment on that? And so you told us a little bit about your life change. That was a big change from a graduate student and then, an entrepreneur who was young, I assume inexperienced in business. So how would you comment on that schedule change, just that effort you needed to put in just that start of your company?
Yeah. So, whether or not it's a popular opinion, I suppose I would more or less agree with that, but also disagree. And to elaborate on that, when we say, okay, we need to work 78 hours a week, that doesn't mean like you're literally working from 7 to 7 days a week, where you're sitting at your computer coding or doing spreadsheets or whatever. That's not really what it means. It's more the fact that with many other jobs, you're able to, if you're working 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or what have you, you can do that, and then you can go home and unwind as well as possible. And on the weekends, you can unwind as much as possible. It's hard to do that in a startup. It really, it becomes, I've often referred to it as another child of mine. It's another baby, and you can't really get it off your mind. And if there's a 5-alarm fire for whatever reason, you can't just walk away. So I have plenty of stories along those lines. But like if you're deployed at a hospital and you're outside of your normal work week, but something goes wrong and they and their patients are relying on it to work, you could, but I certainly wouldn't just say like, sorry, like I'm off duty. Like it just doesn't work that way, right? So because of that, that's often where I think that sentiment comes from. And the other piece to it is it's a competitive landscape as well. And you're building something, there might be other people building something similar. And those other people might just be working more than you. And in order to keep up, sometimes you just have to put the work in. And that's not to say that's literally everybody. I don't want to suggest that if you're working at a startup, you're going to work what I just described, because it's not. There's plenty of room for people to, and I like to believe that we have that culture with our employees where they have guardrails and we make sure to respect that and we respect their work-life balance. But certainly for the founding team, we kind of live, cry, bleed, sweat the company. And it's just the way it is.
So what will be your average if it's not 70 hours? Let's say the first 2 years of Gray Oncology.
Yeah, so that's where it's difficult for me to really say, because on one hand, it's like 100 hours because I'm kind of always thinking about it. It's hard to get it off my mind. And that's also my own personality. So that's not necessarily a requirement. It's just the way I am. And also I'll multitask a lot. So like if I'm watching a hockey game, it's not really working. I'm watching a hockey game. I'll send emails while I do that. So I can be kind of efficient like that. So on one hand, it's like 100 hours. But on the other hand, as far as the extremely focused work, it is probably closer to 40, I would say, where I'm, in front of a computer working during the days. And part of the reason for that, not to go too much on a tangent, is I do have 3 kids. And I want to make sure that I have the relationship I want to have with them. So as far as things like on weekends, I can't do what I could have done 10 years ago, where I'm just going to sit at the computer all day and work for the day. I don't want to do that. So because of that, it kind of means I can't, even if I wanted to, I can't work 80 hours at the computer.
Yes, everything requires time, and then you need to order your priorities. About work-life balance, I really like you brought that up, and having 3 kids. And at the time you were starting with your company, you had 1, as I remember from our conversation. How did that work together? Your family life, graduating, preparing for your thesis defense. I assume that was, COVID era and things were really rough. So how did that all look for you at that time?
Well, I'm certainly always tired. So there's that. And that's probably a combination of just being 32 and having kids and working a full-time job and all that. It is kind of like it just keeps swimming, like one foot in front of the other. Every day is a new day. You wake up, you rinse, repeat. And I don't mean that to sound bad. And you kind of just keep moving forward. As far as I have, let's call it, protected time. And I try to push that culture through to the rest of the company as well. Like you may hear some, let's call them horror stories of startups where whether they're gaslighting their employees or actually forcing their employees, they'll basically be saying like, you need to be working until 8 or whatever, or their employees feel like they need to stay in the office until the boss is gone. And you'll see that in a lot of industries. It's not just startups, because they feel like if they leave before the boss leaves, like it might look bad. Even if they say, oh, it's okay, like you never know, right? Whereas for me, like at 4:15, 4:30, like I have to pick up the kids. And it just is what it is. And that's what I'm doing. So like very often, I would be the first one to leave the office every day because I'm going to pick up my kids. And that's the type of thing that I want to push forward to them, to know that they can also do that. And then similarly, like on weekends, like granted, I'll always have my phone on me, so I'm always going to be able to respond or answer something if I have to. But most of the time on weekends, like I will be spending time with my family, and that's just what it is. So, and I try to kind of permeate that culture through others. So yeah, it's overall, it's good. It works. I'm certainly not the first one to have a company and also have a family, and I won't be the last. So
that's wonderful. So if we transition a little bit into talking about a necessary skill set one has to have to become an entrepreneur and build your own business. I'm thinking of all of our students, listeners who are trying to maximize their skill set before they go out there and look for their job or even start their own company. Looking back, is there anything you wish you knew before starting this business? Something, any skill you wish you had? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I could highlight a handful. I'll stick to two. I think those are the main ones that come to mind. And admittedly, I'm probably biased having sort of being a physicist and a statistician by training. So that kind of guides how I think of just life. But it might be cliche, but a focus on soft skills more than hard skills, as far as I'm concerned. Like hard skills are learnable. Like if you don't know this coding language or you don't know the ins and outs of this particular cell pathway or whatever, like you can go learn that. But more of the soft skills, the two that always come to mind for me are resiliency, like is huge. And by that, I mean like a startup and any difficult job and just life itself it's a roller coaster. It's an emotional roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs. And if every time you get down, it's easier to get back up, and vice versa. If every time you get up, you don't let it get to your head too much, I find that has been one of the most helpful things for me to develop, kind of just keeping somewhat of a level head and being able to kind of go with the punches and get up when you get down and so on and so forth. And then also just critical problem solving, like critical thinking. Like if you're trying to solve something, whatever it is, whether it's a sales call or marketing or an HR crisis or what have you, like really being able to just dissect all the information and logically walk through it, understand what are unknowns, understand where the assumptions are, understand what pieces of information that you might actually be assuming and they're not just a given. All those things and kind of piecing together that puzzle, I would say is the most critical piece to do this. But honestly, I would say like just to move forward in your professional career, that's what I would recommend.
I love the topic of resilience. Just personally, I think it's one of the critical things to acquire. Whether you're doing your PhD or you're starting your own business, starting a family, that really gets me fired up. So for all of our MCTRC listeners, especially the students, I remember when my first paper got rejected, I did cry. Well, I'm not very proud of saying that, but there's so much effort that goes into certain things, right? And it's so disappointing when you
get used to it. Exactly.
Yes, get used to it.
Which I'm sure you know by now.
Yes. And I have a great mentor, and she would tell me, never quit. You never quit. Yeah. You put in too much effort to quit now. And that was very useful. So, but if you can talk to that and about that issue just a little bit more, how do you build resilience? How do you build resilience? We know on the academic side, it looks a little different. You need to push through, repackage your paper, do that extra experiment, do that extra 10 experiments because your reviewer too is asking for it. But now in the context of your company, and let's say that deal didn't go through, that hospital is not really happy with how things are going. Can you speak to that? What do you do then, and how do you communicate that with your team?
Yeah, that's a hard one. In part because I don't think I've fully, I don't claim to have fully figured it out. For me, probably, and some of this is because, we had it down like a week ago. So I'm thinking of how my brain walked through it then. And I talked earlier about how like your mind is always on it. And clearly that's not a good thing, especially when it's down, because then it can, it seeps into the rest of your life and it can make your entire weekend suck if you're dwelling on it, which 4 years ago, there definitely were a couple times when that would happen. And yeah, like it ruins your weekend or it ruins your week, and that's not good for anybody. So when more recently, like I have ways now that is like, all right, I almost need to reset. Like to deal with that big hit, the big slap to the face, whatever you want to call it. It's like I need to basically just take my mind like entirely off work, turn my mind off entirely. And this was like watch a comedy movie. Like just watch like I with my wife, we opened a bottle of wine and we just watched like a laugh out loud comedy movie rather than watching like a Oscar bait movie or something like that, or going on Schindler's a walk List. And having a stimulating discussion or whatever. I was just like, and it worked out well because she was in a similar position that day, but it's like, let's just turn our brains completely off and turn them into mush. And that's what we did. So having things like that are often more on the life side of the work-life balance that can help you ground yourself again. And then yeah, the getting up part, that's where it might be harder for me to describe, like how, when you come back on Monday morning, how do you just keep it going? In my case, it frankly, which again might not be a great answer, but it's just there's so much that I have to do. Like whether it's a full email inbox or a laundry list of stuff I need to get done, I don't have the time to sit and grovel, unfortunately. Like if I did that, it would cause me more stress because then I would watch the list pile up even more and it would just sort of spiral. So now I think I have enough experience to have the foresight that if I don't just get back on the horse and keep going, it's only going to get worse. And again, I know that might not be the most helpful way to describe this, but it now is what has worked for me, I suppose.
Yeah, let's keep it going. Let's keep resilience in the game for all of us and all those who are listening. Usually people who start their own business or they start their own lab or even start a new job, talk about the importance of a vision and the importance of that vision being communicating to their team. And so in your company, would you tell us a little bit about your vision? Maybe that vision also changed within now 5 years of you running the company. And if someone comes to Gray Oncology Solutions and wants to get a job, what would he or she be told about your vision and what are you out to do?
Yeah, for sure. And actually it's a nice segue because that is also one piece to keep you going on a resilience topic. Is having it's not a light at the end of the tunnel. That sounds too grim, but knowing where you're going and still kind of pushing, I don't want to say blindly towards that, but having something to look at that you want to all sort of collectively achieve. So on our end, it's right now we effectively coordinate appointment scheduling in a few areas of cancer care. So radiation, infusion, therapy, and the imaging around it are kind of the big pieces. The longer term goal is to have a platform that is mature enough from a technical point of view that it can effectively coordinate healthcare across every type of appointment. So if you, in essence, imagine that there was one system that could determine and book whether you had a follow-up or a walk-in or an image or dialysis or a kidney transplant or what have you. And all of these different pieces basically are centered around the patient and is being booked for what works for the patient, what works for the provider. And also can fit multiple physical locations. Maybe there's 4 places within 10 kilometers of you that could deliver this particular type of care. How can we coordinate all of that to be as effective, as efficient as possible and as quick as possible? So that is kind of the longer term goal as we expand even beyond cancer. Taking that one step further, there's a number of different ways we can go. The main one is introducing some level of clinical decision support into the scheduling, where not only are we helping you book where you're going to go and when you're going to go there, we're also able to provide the clinical staff and the patient and their family, what have you, some level of not purely statistics based, but at least some level of scientifically guided visualization almost of what are the chances that this works, or if we have 3 different ways you can go, 3 different types of treatment, let's say, what are the side effects with one versus the benefits of the other? And then you can kind of weigh all of those and compare those in a easy to interpret and hopefully statistically driven fashion. Now, evidently, that is mostly applicable for something very serious like cancer, where there might be multiple options that have different pros and cons. Whereas if it's like you're going to get a vaccine, I'll help you book the vaccine. You probably don't need to know what it does. But even then, I did actually before use that example of where I was like, okay, if you have the Moderna vaccine or the J&J vaccine, to go back 4 years, if anybody remembers those.
No, we all forgot about that.
I don't even know which one you get now. Sorry, that's a sidetrack, but I don't know what's like the main one you got to get when you get a COVID vaccine nowadays. But anyway, J&J, Moderna, let's say, I can't remember which one was more appealing, but there was definitely a time where it was like one of them was the one you wanted, or at least that's what
If I
That's what
remember
people tried to
correctly, I
push.
think it was Pfizer, but
It was Pfizer?
I
Okay.
might be wrong.
Sure. So, point is, let's say you can get Pfizer, but it's in a week because there's a backlog, or you can get J&J and you can get it tomorrow. Being able to
Right.
kind of provide that level of, hey, there's two options here. Maybe one is clinically worse or it's clinically different. The side effects are a bit stronger, whatever, but you can have it tomorrow. And that's kind of the type of thing that you would be able to weigh. So that's I guess, the longer term vision of the company as a whole.
That sounds great. So, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently? Anything you would change about graduating, starting your company, just creating a team, hiring people? Is there any other thing, something you would change?
Yeah, so the cop out answer, which is true, is to go back to what we said before. I would have been more resilient and a better critical thinker sooner. So, like, I would have developed those skills even earlier because it just would have made everything smoother. And that is, I would say, true. Not very concrete though. Like, of course, like if you get more experience earlier, it's better. I think a more obvious one that might be more directly sort of actionable for people is take action quickly, like, and decisively on things in general. Like, if you're feeling a way about something, or you think there's a problem in your business, in your PhD, whatever, don't dwell on it. Like, just identify what the issue is or what the solution is, and then sort of move forward on it. Like, don't wait around for something to change unless you're deliberately waiting for some specific reason, which is fair. But I guess maybe that's a better word, deliberate. Be very deliberate in what you're doing. And I think certainly in the first year or two, there were a few areas where, hey, if we did that like a month earlier, there's really no reason we delayed that action for a month, but we just did. Don't rest on that. Like, don't rest on just not doing something for the sake of it, or vice versa.
Don't procrastinate.
That's probably another good way to put it.
So, some exciting news. Your company actually received a prestigious 2024 Oncology Award presented by the Programme Québécois de Cancérologie. And so that's very exciting and a major honor. And I know that there are some exciting things coming also in 2025. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's was a bit of a surprise for us to receive, actually. But we of course were kind of born in Quebec, and we partner with the CHUM. And then over the past few years, we've expanded into a number of other hospitals. I believe 5 now in Quebec. And this particular award was effectively those hospitals gathered together and put together a presentation to give to sort of the Ministry of Health and some of their affiliates about the software and what it had accomplished and the impact that it had. And it was very nice to be recognized for kind of the collaboration
for
that we
that.
did there. Thank you.
And maybe if you can talk to us a little bit about your new projects and exciting things that are coming for Gray OS.
Yeah, definitely. So now let's call it the cancer side of the platform, what I described earlier, it's always improving. Of course, it's a software in 2025, but it's more or less mature in the sense of we are able to roll it out to a hospital if they want it, and it delivers value to them. So now we're beginning to kind of expand that in different directions, as I mentioned before, as aligned with our vision. And the first one is endoscopy, which you touched on, where we now are applying that same type of technology and sort of that same foundation into a different vertical, being endoscopy. And we've partnered with an organization within the NHS across the sea to actually roll that out in the UK. So that's kind of where we saw the first enthusiasm for endoscopy. And because of that, we said, hey, let's work together and we'll effectively provide the software and you'll roll it out and sell and market it. So we'll see how that goes. And then, hopefully it's just the beginning of a relationship. So the hope is that then leads to bringing this endoscopy module elsewhere within the world and then expanding beyond endoscopy as well. Diagnostic imaging is a big one that we've heard a lot about recently and are exploring to get into right now.
So exciting. So it's also moving overseas expanding, all the good stuff. So now we want to just touch a little bit on something that's exciting and controversial, and all at the same time. It could be just a little bit of a can of worms, but AI is a buzzword. It's a hype. Artificial intelligence also in healthcare. How do you see AI and big data shaping the future of oncology and in general patient care?
Yeah, I mean it's everywhere, whether we like it or not, and that's really what I tell everybody. It's a tidal wave that you're not going to be able to avoid it. It's going to be in everything we do, and that extends to healthcare. In oncology in specific, and let's say my domain, because of course when it comes to things like drug discovery and all that, which is related to cancer as well, it's rampant there. I can't speak as much to that because it's not my expertise. But in the logistics space, a few of the main areas that we're already actually using are predictive analytics, predicting patient flow in the future. So basically determining what type of patients are going to be coming through the system and what burden are those patients putting on the system, as in what resources are they going to require. And then if we know that 2 weeks in advance, I can then intelligently try to staff, or I can intelligently try to say, okay, maybe we shouldn't overbook Friday 2 weeks from now, because if we overbook, we're going to be screwed, because half of the patients coming that day are expected to maybe go 10 minutes overtime, and we'll have to work way into the night if we do that. So a lot of those sort of predictive elements that humans are not incapable of doing, but certainly it's much more difficult for them to do accurately, AI certainly plays a role in what we do. The other area, which is, I would say, younger, is you look at generative AI stuff, ChatGPT, so on and so forth. We're exploring sort of chatbots for support. So a lot of different software, of course, in the hospital require support channels. And if there's a way where we can deliver the same experience and the same very high quality support that we deliver, but we don't necessarily need somebody actually sitting right there talking to you, of course, that's just more scalable. We can support more people at the same time. So that's another area where I think, I don't know if it'll enter our business just yet, but certainly you're going to see a whole lot of that in healthcare.
And what would you say to people who are not only skeptical, but afraid of artificial intelligence, especially AI making decisions in healthcare, which might be the future? How would you speak to that? And
Yeah.
especially maybe thinking about someone might be listening to this and, there may be an older generation. Maybe, we're young people, we're very excited about AI. We like all the features of it. And, but maybe for people who are not so very acquainted with that, and that's very new to them, there can be
Yeah.
a lot of skepticism and even fear. I would like to see a physician. I would like that person to listen to me and to care about me. But if I have a chatbot, if I have someone, intelligence that's not human, I might have a certain, fear or anxiety or restraint. How would you speak to those listeners?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's, a major, I don't want to say concern, but is a major point of attention with any sort of AI, especially in healthcare. Putting aside concerns about, AI and data sharing and, the recent White House initiative and all that, which I share a lot of the same concerns that many people do. If we're talking specifically healthcare, interpretability, for one, is very, very important. So what I mean by that is not having just a black box that just says, this is better than that, and here's why. Or not just having a black box that says, I think this patient is going to be twice as long. Their appointment's going to take twice as long as we think it will. Full stop. But giving insight into the user or the patient, whoever is interacting with the piece of software, as to why is that decision made. And maybe for the example I just gave of the person, maybe it's, okay, they're older, maybe they're already sick, maybe their last appointment went 20 minutes overtime. And because of that, we can say with pretty high confidence that this is going to happen. And then a user can look at it and say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. The second piece, as far as the human interaction goes, is really just the fact that Personally, I don't think it will replace the human touch. I think it shouldn't replace the human touch. I think it should be replacing a lot more of the more autonomous mechanical things that the human can't necessarily do as well. And actually, that can free up the human to deliver even more of a human touch. One of the radical ways that I've put it before when, we're having cloud in the sky thinking is that like a hospital in 100 years could literally just be nothing but basically therapists. Like you have robots
Wow.
and computers that are doing all of the not decision making, but they're presenting information in a way that is then basically analyzed and a final call is made by a human. And then all the people that you're interacting with are people who, and I'm saying therapists broadly speaking, but people who their explicit training and expertise is in that human connection. And that's their whole point. And so that's kind of going off script a
Very
little bit.
futuristic. Yeah.
But the idea here I'm trying to get across here is I don't think, or at least I hope not, I share those same concerns that I don't think we're going to get to a point where it's like your cancer diagnosis is going to be broken to you by a television screen. That's just a robot. Like that wouldn't make any sense to me. And I haven't heard anybody or any company try to actually push that type of thing forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's still many more regulations that we need to see in terms of getting the full AI capacity within the healthcare.
Yeah.
And one question that was also on my mind is, within your logistical software, how do you take into account, how do you balance out between the needs of patients and then the needs of workers or the healthcare providers, technologists, physicians? How do you optimize for that?
It's a very good question because, they not always. It's of course the golden scenario. It's the best case scenario where you can optimize for both at the same time. But often when you're doing a mathematical optimization, unfortunately, those two things are actually directly at odds with one another. Basically, as one goes up, the other goes down. And that's the same as like raw efficiency is often at odds with the sanity of your staff. So 2 examples I can give. The best case scenario for scheduling is if I effectively have a blank canvas of a calendar and I can throw 200 patients at it. And I'm basically just saying fit them as well as possible. However, that doesn't take into account any of the patient's preferences, what they want. And it also, if you do that, you could theoretically do that every 5 seconds. And every time there's a change, we're going to keep switching things to make it more efficient. And then, of course, you're going to have to keep telling the patient, okay, we moved you, we moved you, we moved you, we moved you. Basically, imagine like if an airline, which unfortunately you often see anyway, if your flight just kept being moved forward, backwards, sideways, it's moved to the next day, like that would be the lever pushed all the way in the direction of the system being efficient. And then on the worker side, if I'm assigning patients to nurses, often what we see is that they'll set a cap where a nurse can only see somewhere between 6 and 8 patients a day. This is for infusion therapy. And that's kind of their maximum. And then we optimize with that constraint in mind. If I remove that constraint entirely, I will be able to get more efficient. Like I will be able to fit 9 or 10 patients per day on each nurse. You'll burn out your nurses extremely quickly, but in theory, it is more efficient from a mathematical point of view. So that is the balance that the software needs to strike. Now, to answer the original question of how do we handle that, the short answer is we don't, because we effectively allow the hospital, they get to decide that. So the users themselves are the ones who get to determine, basically, think of like a slider where they can effectively slide it in one direction or the other or anywhere in between. They get to decide how much efficiency do I want to gain and at what cost. And we try to provide as much sort of data visualization to give them an idea of what are you giving up? Like, okay, I'll make it a bit more efficient, but I have to make 6 phone calls telling patients that their appointment's moved. And we have users on both sides of the spectrum. Like we have one hospital that literally will never move a patient appointment, which is in some sense great for the patient, but it also leaves a ton of efficiency on the table because you're basically just shooting yourself in the foot in terms of fitting people on resources that are unused if you're never going to move appointments. And then we have some on the complete other end, which are legitimately like, I don't even tell the patients what their time is until the day of, which is also kind of insane to me. but nonetheless, we put it in the hands
of sounds a little insane, yes.
We put it in the hands of the hospital, and they get to decide. And we support both or everything in between.
So the hospital center is still autonomous. They still have, still hold that prerogative to make these decisions.
They're always in control of everything. Everything we do require. I know, in the academic world, human in the loop is often the lingo that's used. There is always a human in the loop. Everything we do is you have to have a human who clicks save or verify or whatever. Nothing is ever done without a human doing that.
Absolutely. We still have humans doing the majority of that, and we're happy to have them. So we're coming to the end of this episode. It's been a fun ride. So I have two questions to close us off. And the first one is, what is that one thing you wish more people knew and our listeners knew about the work you do at Gray Oncology Solutions? It can be something funny. It can be something very difficult or whatever you choose.
I think probably more broadly speaking, this goes just beyond just Gray, but also into a lot of other innovative technologies, especially software in healthcare, is that there is so much that goes into this type of company and this type of translational research that is beyond just the pure technology. As in, it's not as simple as just building a nice software. There is so much human elements to it. Change management is the official word, where you really, really need to manage the people there and make sure that they're using the tool effectively and that they're buying into it and that they understand why it's being deployed. And that's just a really, really, really big piece to this that I certainly didn't know of 5 years ago. And yeah, I think it would be good for people to know, both because to me, I mean, I look at it half glass full. That might be a more exciting challenge for some people where they actually want that. They don't just want to go sit in a basement and just code some technology forever. They actually want the fact that, okay, you have to interact with human beings who are going to use it and understand their needs and their pains and their fears. And that is a very, very big piece to what we do as well. It's not as simple as just a piece of technology.
And how can our listeners and people who are very interested in this domain support you? How can researchers, clinicians, patients even collaborate or support your mission and your vision?
Honestly, just reach out and have a conversation is the easiest way. I mean, I'm always open to pick someone's brain and then sort of listen to their experiences, feedback, whatever it is. If this is something that you have felt a pain from or haven't, like even if you basically are saying, I don't understand why your software needs to exist at all, that's just as valuable because then I can try to understand where that's coming from, because it might actually be, you went to a health system that was doing this exceptionally well, which is great. I mean, ultimately that would be aligned with what we want. But yeah, just having a conversation about your experiences that are related is always helpful.
And then one bonus or extra, because I'm concerned with all of our colleagues and all of our graduate students or master students who are thinking about going for that industry job and just trying to set themselves up for success, what would be your advice to them? Or let's say if they are courageous enough to actually reach out to get that interview with Gray Oncology, what are some things to take into account, prepare, level up?
Well, I would actually just say, I mean, you kind of brought it up in terms of saying by reaching out. Going through my academic career, I'd go to a few seminars or sessions or whatever on people talking about networking, the word networking. And I would always roll my eyes. Like, we all would. I'd roll my eyes at it.
What is that?
I have now joined that cliche army of the importance of networking and reaching out. And I can tell you why. Because now, as an employer, I hate hiring. We all hate hiring. Nobody likes to hire. And the worst piece of hiring is the anxiety and the fear of like, is this person going to work out? It's a complete unknown. I have to sift through 1,000 resumes of people that I don't even know if they're real people. Half of them might be bots. I literally just don't know. And it's miserable. If you know the person because you networked, even if like they just know your name because they exchanged an email once, that already puts you like 100 times above the wave of resumes. Basically, by the time you see a LinkedIn ad or an Indeed ad or wherever a job board is, by the time you see it actually there, it's because that employer has exhausted literally every single person that they actually know. So, I'm just saying, like, the networking thing of how you level up is by meeting, like, just meet someone, and then you never know. They might reach out to you later if they think that they have a position that could fit you. You could just email them once every 3 months being like, hey, is there a position available? You could follow the company, whatever. All those things put you way above the rest of the field as far as I'm concerned. And then the other piece, this is me biased just because it's who I am. You can probably tell. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I tend to then have that same opinion in an interview of just be yourself. Like, don't try to don't try to game the interview by answering the questions like you think they should be answered, because any experienced interviewer is going to see that from a mile away. They're going to see you're not being genuine. And that means that even if who you are is someone they genuinely want, they're not going to see that. So yeah, just be yourself. And hopefully that works out. I mean, like,
okay, guys.
Clearly, if who you are is just a terrible person, then
then pretend
then maybe
to
pretend,
be someone
but,
else.
Yeah.
But if you're okay, you just do better by being you.
For sure. At least to me, I can't speak that I'm the only interviewer on the planet, but to me certainly, and to many other people I respect, it's exactly the same way.
Yeah, I think it's so invaluable to see it from the other side and to hear you speak to that, because the students, we don't have many opportunities to maybe network or mingle with CEOs. So it was really an honor to have you today with us, Andre. Thank you so much. And all the best with your projects, all the best with your team, with your company, and also in your work-life balance in 2025 and beyond. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.